Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of VB Spotlight, where we're going to discuss how to engineer player-first experiences that mobile gamers create. My name's Jordan Fragan. I'm a writer at GamesBeat, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm being joined by two lovely people. Eric, can you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I don't know if lovely is the right word, but I'll take it. Thank you. Thanks, Jordan, for having us. And thanks, Pablo, for joining. My name's Eric Futoran. I've been around 12 years in mobile and 20 years in just taking action from a lot of data. Most recently, I founded Embrace, which helps engineers build better experiences, hence my joining this webinar. And then before that, I founded Scopely, where I co-founded the company, but also co-developed and published games like Walking Dead. I personally built Dice with Buddies, which became Yahtzee, Star Trek, WWE, Wheel of Fortune, 7 #1 games. So excited to be here. I love this topic. It's kind of my career now, mobile experiences. So appreciate you having me. And then Pablo, I hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Jordan, for inviting me also to this roundtable. Eric, it's like amazing experience, and I'm happy to be here with all of you. My name is Pablo. I've been developing games for almost 10 years. I'm interested in technical challenges of developing large-scale multiplayer games, and currently I'm working on a client software architect position at Superplay company. And our company is one of the most rapidly growing game companies. We're developing several games with the most known title, Dice Dreams. And thank you once again for inviting me to this meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, who better to join me to talk about what makes mobile games so great? You guys have so much experience and have been in the industry for such a long time. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how users' expectations have changed since you first started out. And I don't know if there's been any major developments in the last couple of years, especially since COVID, that you guys have noticed.
From our side, from Superplay company, it's significantly increased. For example, you have noticed a huge amount of new games like hyper-casual, blockchain, NFT, AR, and much more type of games. This means that all of this led to changes in even casual software development. And for example, flood of hyper-casual games set a new standards for us, for our company, for our projects. And all of this is about players' emotions. Some games makes players angry, happy, crying, and even some of them screaming. Some games engage users to play day in a day. And for our game, it means we must be on the top of the market. Our game should have amazing visual appear. It should feel fast and very good for our players. What do you think, Eric, about it?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if I think back to 10 years ago when I built Dice with Buddies, it was early iPhone. In some ways, the iPhone just came out. Every user you got or lost even, there was 5 more people that bought a phone and just came. And so the expectations for players were pretty low. In today's world, I mean, hardware's gotten better. Like what you're mentioning, it's way more competitive and the expectations have gotten up. I think that's what's interesting, and I like to think about for the audience now that I'm both ends, both a game developer and a vendor, helping game developers. It's conflicting. So you have these experiences that people need that are better, and at the same time, you have these devices that are getting handed down. You have trends like proliferation to other geos or to other demographics, which I think we'll talk about, and it just got a lot harder.
Getting down to the basics of it, obviously, the player's experience is so fundamental to what you guys are delivering onto the market. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you would define player experience and what does it mean to your organization? I'm sure it changes a little bit based on the type of game. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Pablo, I'll take this one to start, Pablo. When I built Scopely, and part of the reason I built Embrace is because of player experience. I mean, the concept is conceptually easy. I mean, we think about it, and we just talked about how players' experiences and expectations are getting way harder to meet. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what drives our teams to build great experiences. Like engineers like Pablo want to build great games. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the gaming industry. They'd be doing other things. And it's because when you walk on a plane or like walk in a park or a restaurant, it's kind of fun to watch other people play your games or talk about them. But player experience, and it might be controversial, it comes down to kind of how you measure it. So if you think about the core KPIs of any game, it's really 2, 3. I mean, at the high level, it's LTV, retention, and then you can think about it as like your effective CPI, which is organic, inorganic to acquire a user. And it might be controversial, but when you try to drive player experience, the best games, they're thinking people complain. There's tons of bugs. And what they really care about is driving those KPIs. And as much as you love making great experiences, at the end of the day, if you make a game that people come back to, even if they're complaining, they enjoy it. And if they leave, that's the ultimate measure of somebody not having their expectations met. And so the better the retention, the less inclined teams are to kind of go after player experience and improve the bugs, like to remove bugs. And they start pushing more on optimizations because they're trying to build new features, and more features creates more issues. And then you're optimizing. And the worse the game on the churn and the retention metric, the more they're bug bashing. And so I think about I'm going to throw my old company under because it was one of my games, but like Star Trek. Star Trek's an unbelievable game and has crazy LTVs and retention. And so it's well known that players complain about that game all the time. Like if you're in the Discord forums, people complain about it. It's because it's really hard to work on those KPIs when people just keep coming back to the game. So then the team works more on the monetization features to improve LTV and their margins, and then if you have higher LTV, you can acquire more users, and it becomes this cycle, and then you become more focused on performance. And so that's kind of how I think about the controversial part. Like it's easy to talk player experience, but it really does come down to the metrics. I don't know if Pablo, do you want to add anything there?
I fully agree with you. For us, player experience, it's like combination of business metrics, technical metrics, and player expectations. And it's like a question about trade-offs. We can't rely only on monetization metrics because it won't be a good player experience. And we can't create a game with fully expectations of the players because this game won't be successful and profitable for business. It's a very tricky question, I would say, and tricky answer. And for example, in our company, we're asking ourselves how our players feel our game. And from a technical perspective, for example, we are using Embrace, and we have a huge amount of charts of metrics, and we can analyze it. If users facing with like technical problems, that means that they have a bad player experience. User can't play, user will complain in store, and it's not a good experience for them. It's awful experience, I would say. And it's about metrics, about expectations, about questions from business to our customers, from customers to the business. And this is like an infinite process. Like we can say that like today we're using these metrics and game will be successful. We should ask this question from day to day, from month to month, from year to year, and create for our players the most interesting experience.
Yeah, for the folks listening, like to make it real for them, I love what Pablo's saying. Like as a founder of a bunch of number one games, like I was always paranoid. Like if the LTV doesn't stay higher than your CPI, your effective CPI, and effective is organic, inorganic, you're screwed. And I was always nervous, especially like as Apple changes the ad policies, as like maybe you have a really big technical issue and you're not being proactive, and then you have to wait 2 weeks to release, and then your LTV is tank. If the LTV, it'll cross the CPI line before you realize it, and if that happens, your game is dead. Like it's really hard to come back. And so I want to just push what Pablo's saying for people who are listening. Like as much as teams really want to talk player experience and engineers want to keep talking about it. You really have to talk the same language. You have to get underneath the cover, talk the metrics that really build up to the LTVs, the eCPIs, your retention rates, and then make sure you're talking the same language and prioritizing those things that move those levers. Because it doesn't matter what if players' experiences and expectations are. If your game sucks and you can't actually like make it a business, no one's going to be playing your games. You'll be dead. And there's so many dead bodies that people don't talk about along the way. I mean, I killed a ton of games along the way at Scopely.
I'm sure. And we've talked a little bit about some of the metrics you guys are using to sort of make these game time decisions, but, and obviously no developer wants to put out fires, but they, are inevitably going to crop up. What are some of the biggest challenges do you think to delivering these like premium flawless player experiences?
I would like to answer on this. It's a pretty interesting question and difficult, very difficult for me as for engineer. And I would like to say that the biggest challenge for me is communication between departments and players, between business and players. As a part of R&D department, I'm responsible for some technical stuff. And in the company, we have a huge amount of other departments. And the user has their expectations. And we need to find trade-offs between all of our departments for the features, for the goals, for the future, and to predict, will it be interesting for the user or no? And sometimes it's really challenging because sometimes business would like to request something very difficult from technical side. It could break the whole application, but it could be interesting for users or no. And it's about trade-offs. We're struggling sometimes in these fights between business, technical engineers, and player expectations, because our goal, as I said before, it's excellent player experience. We would like to make our players happy, engaged to play our game. And another thing is we're a company, we should make money of it. And for me, from our side, it's about communication. It's to find trade-offs between requirements of technical possibilities. And the second part is to make our game better from day to day. If we have some technical problems, this means users are struggling. We would like to improve it. And to improve it, we need to have sometimes our work, we need to spend time from day to day to improve our technical side of the project, to be in touch with business, with market, with our players. And it's not the easiest one, yeah.
Yeah, I empathize. I mean, once upon a time, my team may laugh at me. I was an engineer. But when I was building games, and honestly, it's part of the reason Embrace exists. It's because it's really hard. I mean, you're hearing it. Like at the end of the day, and I'm sure Pablo's about to smile, is that the engineers get blamed for almost everything. Like users complain, the CEO uses the app or the GM or product manager like me of the game, and then they see an error, like a frozen startup. I had that issue with Walking Dead all the time. And then you're like, I just give my phone to the engineer. I'm like, go fix it. And they're like, holy crap, there's nothing I can do. Like is it my code? Is it an ad SDK, which everyone likes to blame? Is it third party? Is it the user experience? Like sometimes I could just be on low power loud and my connection could suck and it's my fault as the user. And there's just no way to talk that language. And so when you want to get to flawless player experiences and really drive the metrics we were talking about, like how do you get all that information in one place so that an engineer can actually answer the question? Like, do I want to work on it and can I solve it? And I mean, and once upon a time engineer, the most frustrating thing is you have a problem that comes to your plate and then you're like, I don't want to work on this. I don't know the priority. I can't tell what the real impact is to these metrics. So why the hell are you asking me to work on it? And it's so frustrating. And then you end up working on some of these, and then they don't drive the metrics. And then it creates this like negative feedback loop between the different teams. And then engineers often get like numb. And so like it is obviously not a good situation. And then there are a lot of game teams that happens. And then those game teams end up, you'll see it, they work on features endlessly, and they never work on the things like the technical debt, the platform, the real metrics that drive the game performance and make them successful, because you don't end up saying the same things, and you don't end up actually focusing on what drives impact, which is players paying for things, watching ads, coming back, socializing, inviting their friends. And those are really hard to measure, especially in mobile. There's so much variability. I mean, mobile's all about the people, and it's really hard to understand them.
I'm sure, especially because the audience is so broad and you have so many, sources of information to draw from. We talked a little bit about the cost per install, and just, how to manage that. I mean, I can imagine how important it is to improve discovery and rankings in either the App Store or the Google Play Store. What's the impact of like both positive and negative experiences on these rankings? And I don't know what some of the direct or indirect effects might be. Things like featuring. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how much of a priority it is to or if that's a red flag or a warning sign that you guys use.
Yeah, I'll start this one off, Pablo. We've talked a lot about expectations, so I'll answer it differently and then come back to your question. Like Google is releasing all of these performance metrics in the Google Play console and connecting it to other tools like Embrace or Firebase. There's a reason, right? They didn't have to do that. Apple's doing it as well. They're not releasing the metrics, but they are driving rankings based on performance. And there's one reason, and it's all our faults. Like they don't want to work on that stuff. They don't want to release performance metrics and have the orange line that measures ANRs or crashes or frame rate or other things. It's because game developers are not meeting the expectations of the users, and users are complaining to Google, and Google's having no choice but to create a feedback loop. And so in some ways, they're policing the games and creating a hammer. And if you don't hit that orange line, you don't get ranked. And if you don't get ranked, you don't get organic traffic. If you don't get organic traffic, you don't get a good effective CPI. If you don't have a good effective CPI, you will never scale your game. And if you don't scale your game, you have a dead game. And so I think about it like way back when Apple came knocking and wanted to feature, they would come with a list of items. And sometimes it was like, for Yahtzee, it was like, you got to support the first watch. But they also came with the list of items like performance things, or like you have to rank in a certain way. And if you're not top of fold, you don't get featured. If you don't do everything they ask, you don't get featured. And if you get featured, and obviously it's a first world problem, but every game developer wants to get featured. In fact, the individual and indie game developers can get featured much easier than the bigger companies, because especially for Apple, they love these companies. So you have a chance. Don't think you don't, but you have to think about how do you improve performance. And Google has been nice enough to give you kind of those metrics. And so now you have to look at them. And so start building your games around like the ANRs and start thinking about the metrics we've talked about and start improving your games. Oh, I think Google just popped in for some reason on my earphones because I've been saying their name too many times. I don't know if you guys heard that. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Pablo, but I mean, it's featuring and ranking is the lifeblood of games. And so I just went through the whole flow of like why you should care about them. And I don't think enough people really think about it systematically and build a business off of it. I mean, the biggest game companies hire people to manage Apple and Google. You don't need to do that, but it's a symptom of how important it is.
Yeah, that's sadly, but that's true. If you're talking about organic installs, when a user opens any store, he has the first user sees its rating, application size, and featuring. And if application has ANR problems, as Eric said, this means that huge amount of users will complain on it, and it will be reflected on our rankings. Our rankings will be like our featuring will be affected by our ranking. Every user that opens App Store or Google Store will see bad ratings, and user won't install it. And in case, even if user will try to do it, to install our application, in general, to install application, and when a user faces the problem, user will complain. It's customer support, it's company emails, it's director ratings in App Store. And for companies and for us, it's very important to be in touch with them, to have a customer support team, to try to figure out every problem that like we're facing, our players facing. So it's incredibly important. And another stuff, it's also technical thing. It's about app size. Just imagine that you're opening App Store, you see application with 1 gigabyte of size, and you have bad internet connection. You won't install it, like you don't want to do it. So from our side, it's goal to have as less build size as it possible, because we would like to help our users to not waste their money on like internet, on downloading application, and etc.
Makes a lot of sense.
Affecting the rankings. Yeah. And then affecting the rankings sucks. So to make it like real, like I think about like my favorite one is on Unity, the on pause, which I'm sure Pablo has seen like 1,000 times. Like when you go into the Google Play Store or Google Play Console, you'll see a list of like ANRs and crashes, and you know they affect the rankings. How do you solve them? Like on pause is the ultimate Unity culprit. It could be caused by anything, and it's totally unsolvable. So it literally means Unity paused. And so it could be, generally it's an ad provider. It could be your own code. Again, it could be a user experience issue. Google doesn't tell you. Firebase doesn't tell you. So it's like, what do you do about it? Which I think we're about to talk about. But it's tough. And so like it's like your worst best friend. I always think about it, the Google Play Store and Apple. Like they tell you all your problems, but they never tell you how to solve them. So you've got to find ways to solve them that are outside of those stores.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And when I'm looking on this like exceptions in stores, and I see these users, like it makes me sad, because like in general, these problems, it's very difficult to fix from engineering side. But we would like to make the best player experience. And we're trying to find any ways like to use external tools, like to reduce our exceptions, ANR rates, and etc. Like it's very important for us and for users.
I mean, now that we've talked about how important it is to sort of optimize these, these black boxes, sure, you get the information that something's going wrong, but I would love to hear a little bit more about the tools that are now available to developers to actually address these problems. I think there's a lot that's changed in the last couple of years. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what's available now and sort of the things that you think are having the biggest impact on improving player experiences.
I would like to answer on this one. Sorry, Eric, I would like to mention Embrace. It makes our life much more easier, because as I said before, when I'm opening Google Play Console, it's incredibly difficult to understand something. And we're using a huge amount of tools. Like from client side, it's any analytics that we can get access to. It's Embrace, it's Google, it's Apple. For backend, we have sometimes some problems, and we're using Grafana and Prometheus. We have a huge amount of metrics. And in the same time, we're using analytics. It's like business analytics and technical analytics. We're using mixed panel, BigQuery. So it was mentioned by Eric that currently developers and companies should use as much tools as it possible, because we do not have like silver bullet to understand what's going on. We need to catch some metrics from Embrace. For example, I'm opening Embrace dashboards. I'm checking ANR rate, exception rate. I'm checking problematic devices, platforms, maybe countries, and I need to match all of this information from Google Play, and it's very difficult, I would say. And in the same time, I need to request from business analytics some business metrics and business flows for a user who are facing these problems. And I need to get all of these analytics to match all of this and to create hypotheses, like how can we solve it? And it's a huge amount of tools.
I mean, that's why I will talk about Embrace. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, mobile's all about the details. And so the question is, how do you get them right? And so, I mean, Embrace exists because of my personal pain. Like, I hear you, and you probably mentioning less tools than you had pre-Embrace. Like, once upon a time when I was building games, like we had New Relic on the back end, we had logging tools, we had analytics, multiple analytics tools, we had like Firebase and Crashlytics, like at the time. Now Crashlytics is kind of dumbed down as part of Firebase. I hate to say that too, but it's true, and we all think it. There were like 8 to 10 tools. It made no sense. And the crazy thing is none of them had like a user in mind. Like mobile is about the user, and every user experience is different and it's highly variable. And so there were no tools that thought of it that way. They all came from the mindset of logging. Like, logging is great. As a developer, you get to put logs in and get your hunches back. But in mobile, like, you can't log everything. One, you'd blow up the user experience. But two, it takes too much instrumentation, too much time. And then when you do get a log that's an error, it's not telling you how to solve it because you're not storing all the data around it. And then you end up putting more logs in and then re-releasing, and then it takes time. And then what we talked about before, the more times it takes, the less momentum you have, and then engineers get frustrated. And then often you just start living with these errors that kill your metrics. And at the end of the day, again, LTV and retention are your most important metrics and all the underlying pieces. So you want to have a tool set that thinks of it as a user, and that every device is a user, and that logging is just a piece of it. Logging is a form of and a tool within a broader tool set. It's a feature. And so what you want is a play-by-play. Like, you want somebody who stores every session, aggregates that data into those metrics that you're talking about for engineers, and then lets an engineer identify the issue proactively as opposed to reactively, like logs, because it's a purely reactive system, logs. And you want to be proactive and then dig back in. So if you see an ANR, for instance, and that often comes from the Google Play Store or a user complaint or hopefully an alert before it even shows up in either place, then you want to be able to dive in and find that session and see all the details and code lines and everything that led up to the issue. And so the tools available, there aren't that many. Like, most of the tools available are still server-side logging mentality, and they're like sheep, or whatever the saying, wolves in sheep clothing are opposite, and they make you a lot of promises, and then when you implement them, you end up with the same logging tools before, which is great if you're just starting out. But if you actually want to drive performance and user experiences, they have their limitations. And that's why people grow out of them, or they end up with a ton of tools, and you need to consolidate them because you can't have that many. And then you end up hopscotching between them without context, without a concept of a user. And then you end up wasting time or not solving your problems in the first place. And we all want to solve problems fast, and more importantly, know which problems are actually impacting the user. And that's obviously why I'm talking, like, that's what my tool is, Embrace, and I'm proud of it. And it came out of my life as a game developer. So it's been fun. It's fun to help everybody else and talk about the topic. I get passionate.
No, of course. I mean, it's much easier to solve a problem if you've experienced it yourself firsthand, and leveraging that experience to build a great tool that helps developers scale up. On that note, right?
No, go ahead.
Yes. On that note, I think we're just at about time. I'd love to turn the floor over to you guys. I don't know if there's anything else that you think that we should say on the state of mobile gaming experiences that you think our listeners should know.
I think on the tool side, I mean, we're at the beginning stages, like getting the behavioral data and the technical data in one place using a true like observability platform. Everybody uses the term. Don't get confused. It's one of my recommendations for folks. There aren't that many. Pablo mentioned one on the back end, Grafana. We obviously think of ourselves as Embrace on the front end for mobile engineers. Like that goal is to have all that data in one place, and ingesting it, getting it all, and actually making sense of it isn't easy. And there aren't that many companies going after it. So from a way of like the trend and the optimization of experiences, that's where my bet is, and a couple of companies out there, but none on mobile. It's really about how do we stay ahead and get folks like Pablo as proactive as possible and let them build features, as opposed to sitting there and trying to figure out whether the bug or the optimization is something they don't want to work on in the first place.
By the way, about tools, I would like to mention that it's very difficult to find a really cool tool in the market. And to do this, companies need to integrate it, check it on production, and then make decision if it's worth it or no. I would like also to say that before this, we have like a huge amount of steps of reading documentation, like contacting like companies who are providing these tools. But in general, even if you see some really cool tool, it could be a really cool tool, but sometimes it doesn't work on production. It could work only in documentation. And we had some cases in our experience for Dice Dreams that we integrated without really cool tools. We read the whole documentation, we contacted support before integration, all of these things. We integrated it and we achieved nothing. And it's a pain because like we're wasting time on it, we're wasting money on it. And we can't understand what users feel in real time, for example, or not in real time, what problems they are facing. And it's really cool to have such tools like Embrace, customer support. I don't know if it's okay to say that we're in touch with Embrace and they have really cool communication skills. And every time when we're facing some problems, they're like, okay, we will create a bug or ticket. We will try to help you. And it's very rare case in the market because like a huge companies could use tools, and some tools could give you only a small part of something required by business. And in general, they're not very flexible. And for me, it's really cool to see flexible companies that could solve problems, that could do some improvements, and etc.
Thank you for the kudos. I'm sure the team is listening and happy to hear it. Makes me proud.
I'm glad that this was so fun. I thank you guys again for joining me and for joining us here at VB Spotlight. Thank you so much again, and thank you guys for joining us as well. Thank you to our listeners.